Hello, and welcome back to something just a bit different. So, amidst the coronavirus scare, I was taking inventory on the food that I had and the food that I would need in the event of a quarantine. And I was thinking, could I make bread instead of buying it? And for me, the answer is yes. But I was thinking that a lot of people wouldn't. I know a lot of people who don't cook or bake and mostly just eat frozen food and takeout, which there's nothing wrong with that. But they would not be able to make bread. And that's all I'm concerned about. So today we're doing an experiment. Can you make bread out of stuff you can find in an American pantry? Now that we have the question, next we need the process. Now it's been a while since I've done the scientific process, so I'm going to completely butcher it because I don't feel like looking it up. But first we have to figure out what's in bread. Basically, it's flour, yeast, sugar, fat, and water. This makes a basic white bread. Nothing too tasty, but it's bread. I've made a small recipe with these basic ingredients based off of a bunch of bread recipes that I've looked up. Here's the ingredients now. So this recipe is our control, which I made one batch of beforehand just to make sure my recipe actually made bread and not like crackers or something. The bread turned out okay. I didn't add salt to the recipe because it has no effect on the structure of the bread that I'm aware of, and that's what I'm mostly concerned about. So if the bread had salt in it, it would have been pretty decent. Next, I figured out what variables I would be testing. I decided on flour, yeast, and fat. I figured most American households have sugar for coffee and tea and those kinds of things, and that most people have ready access to water. So I decided I was going to test out two different substitutes per variable. The first two doughs I made were the flour substitutes. In these I used ground up ramen and ground up potato chips instead of flour in a 1-to-1 ratio. The next two were the yeast substitutes. For this, I used beer and then a beer and soda combo. I figured the soda didn't have any sort of yeast in it, but the carbonation would help it rise. So that's why I added it in with the beer for the second one. I also decided to use Coca-Cola for my soda because according to a quick Google search, it is the most popular soda in the United States. For these two, I replaced the first set of water with the beer and then 1 tablespoon of water with the Coke. Then I had the fat substitutes. For this, I used applesauce and then peanut butter in a 1-to-1 ratio. The first observation I made was that I somehow had too much flour even though I had just made this recipe a couple hours earlier and didn't have this issue. So I already screwed up. But I just needed in enough to make it a dough. This was consistent with all the ones that had the regular flour. Then for the potato chips and the ramen actually seemed to have enough solids in it, but the potato chip one was very mushy. It didn't help that there was a tiny bit of water in the food processor when I ground it up, but I'm not a real scientist, and this is just an experiment for shits and giggles. And after that, I let them rest for 45 minutes. When I went to put the breads on the baking tray, I noticed the potato chip one was incredibly greasy and squidgy, and it looked absolutely disgusting. And the rest of them seemed a bit dense for bread, even the control. But knowing I most likely fucked up the recipe, I went ahead and threw them in the oven for 15 minutes. Once they were out of the oven, I let them rest for 10 or so minutes. Then I got to try them. I recorded my reactions while eating them, so enjoy some borderline ASMR bread eating. So the breads are out of the oven, and I'm gonna try all of them and record my reactions, and I'm honestly a bit scared for some of them. But first I'm trying the control, just to see how the recipe was, even though I tried it earlier, but I seem to have messed something up. So we'll see how the control works. It's bread. It's dry, very dry. How did I fuck this up? So next is the ramen, and you'll be seeing the photo of it on screen. It fell apart. This isn't a bread. It's ASMR ramen crumbs. The bits that kind of stayed together seem very doughy. I've tried to get a piece and it keeps falling apart in my hand, so I'm gonna go ahead and try it. You know, it actually tastes good. If it stayed together, it would actually be a really, really good bread. The taste is good. Like, the bread recipe doesn't have any salt in it, so it's kind of doomed to fail. But if this actually stayed together, it would genuinely be good. Next up is the potato chip one, and this one, since I made the dough, has genuinely scared me. I actually have a napkin because it's super, super greasy. and I was kind of worried when I put it in the oven that it would just get grease everywhere. But like, first off, it just seems doughy. It doesn't like seem cooked really, but it was in the same amount of time as everything else, so I don't know what its issue is. It was super mushy to begin with, like the dough was, so maybe if I had more potato chips, though it took like half a bag to just get a cup of potato chip flour, so I don't know. Oh, that's horrendous. Oh, tastes like a soggy potato chip. You think the saltiness of a potato chip would come through, but I feel like I'm gonna get. That's horrible. Oh god. Ugh. So those are really the only ones that I had a reaction to. The rest of them were kind of the same. The beer one tasted like the Control. The beer and soda one tasted like the Control, but a little bit sweeter. The peanut butter one had the same texture as the Control, and I don't think I mixed the peanut butter in all the way because there was kind of chunks of it, and it smelled like peanut butter, and it tasted like peanut butter, and it was really weird. The applesauce one, for some reason, was the only one that even rised a little bit, so it was a little bit fluffier. It was honestly better than the Control, but I don't think that was because of the applesauce. I think I just accidentally did something different. All in all, this entire thing was a failure. Nothing turned out right, and somehow I fucked up the Control. But I'm not a scientist, and the only real loss I had was the fact that I had to buy a 6-pack of beer, and I don't like beer, so now I had to figure out what to do with that. Oh, and the fact that I can never look at potato chips the same way again. So we're here at the end of the video. I'm actually recording this and editing everything about 5 days after I did the experiment, and I've gone to the grocery store just to pick some stuff up, and it's a madhouse. There's so much stuff out. The toilet paper aisle is just demolished. There's no toilet paper left. There's hardly any bread. Even the flour is gone. I'm gonna show some pictures here of what I saw. And if we learned anything from my experiment, is that you need something for flour, because potato chips won't do. Do not use potato chips as your flour substitute. It is absolutely disgusting. Buy flour before it runs out. Please.